We're here to show you how you can cook for your dogs at home and how we think, or why we think that it's more beneficial that you cook for your dogs at home than it is to use commercial dog foods. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're just going to put together a very basic meal for your dogs that you can do at home. And of course, certain ingredients you can modify based on allergies or health conditions or things that you're trying to accomplish. You can add certain ingredients. A good example may be like papaya or some papaya for the digestive enzymes if your dog is subject to pancreatitis or something like that, or even things like ginger are good for GI health and so on and so forth. So just very basic things, pretty much the same things that you guys do for yourself at home, especially if you're into naturopathic remedies to certain ailments at home. Your dog's pretty much the same thing as you are. You know, we all operate very similar in our bodies. So pretty much what's good for us is good for them with very few exceptions. And if you have any specific questions about that, just please let us know. And also, if you're ever unsure of a food for a dog, you can usually find that information on any website like ASPCA or whatever. They generally have lists of foods that you should generally avoid. Very common, though, most people already know onions, grapes, things of that nature that you don't want to, chocolate, things of that nature that you don't want your dog to have. What they do have, or what you do want them to have, is the healthy things that we would eat. A very nice, balanced meal, very similar to what we would eat. So if you just imagine a plate of food that you would have at dinner time, now we're talking for a dog, if that was a plate of food for the dog, on that plate of food, roughly you want 50% meat, 25% vegetables, and 25% of a carbohydrate, like maybe barley, rice, oatmeal, potatoes. And that is a little bit of a touchy area right now in the industry. A lot of the push is for grain-free. From what we have learned in the business and what we have researched, grains are perfectly fine for dogs. Dogs have been eating grains for thousands of years. As long as humans have been eating grains and dogs have been at human sides, they have been eating bread or whatever was thrown to them, what was left over from what we were eating, which is kind of how we base our diets a little bit as well. So grains are not necessarily the problem in the industry. The problem is when you have that plate of food for your dog and say maybe 80 or 90% of that plate is grains and 20% is meat. That's what screws up the dogs. And that's pretty much how your pet food manufacturers are steering you. There's a lot of filler and a lot of junk in there. And even with the grains, we don't actually think there's any problems with the grains. It's more of the quality of the grain as well. Any food reserved for human consumption is going to be inspected and of higher quality. If a food is set aside for animal consumption, there's something wrong with it. They can't sell it to a human. The animal has no speaking or say in the matter, so there's no defense there for them to stand up for themselves. So they get fed the sludge. We use all human-grade food, and it makes a huge difference in your animal's health. In fact, when most people come to us and complain of a grain allergy, and we ask them, we say, well, how do you know? And they're like, well, I don't know, but I just suspect. And we're like, well, let's just try our regular formulation with the grain, and chances are the problem is going to resolve itself. And I would have to say 99% of the time that's the case. So that's our way of saying there's something in that grain. There's some pesticide, there's some toxin, there's something going on in there that's causing the problems with grains, not the grain itself. So we use it. And I brought rice as an example because it's just an easy thing for your dog to use. So once again, a basic formulation for any dog is going to be roughly about 50% meat. We're going to use chicken today. We took chicken with the bone and the organ meat and we grind it all up, run it through the grinder. So the bone turns into a pasty mush. There's no chance of splintering or anything like that. But the bone also has very good sources of calcium, which is probably the most important thing you want to take into consideration when you feed your dog. Lots of people will go through this and bring get the good food for their dogs, but they forget about calcium supplementation. And if you don't supplement calcium, your body pulls it away from the bones become brittle, and it can cause a problem. So good rule of thumb is just 1 teaspoon of bone meal powder to 1 pound of food. Just general rule of thumb. It doesn't have to be exact, it's just something to be aware of. And you never want to feed a dog long term, and when I say long term, I'm saying 6 months plus without any calcium. It can just lead to problems. Brown rice, yeah. White rice you'd want to use for a situation where you have an upset stomach, because it's easier for the body to break down. Brown rice is more nutritious, which is why we use brown rice. Oh yeah, eggs are super food for dogs. Unfortunately, very expensive right now, but still well worth it to put it in your dog's diet. Just a good rule of thumb, maybe 10%. You can't really over-egg the dog, don't worry. Dogs don't really have cholesterol problems or anything like that, so eggs are completely fine for them. And once again, going back to the calcium issue, use the eggshells as well. You can see we do it. We grind them up in the deli. We make the hard-boiled eggs in the deli and then just run them through a grinder with the shells. So the grinder cuts the shells down where they're not going to harm the dog in any way, and they're just quite nutritious for the dog to have. Pumpkin, I'm sure we've all used this for our dog. We just build it in for you because everyone calls and says, what do we do? And we say, give them pumpkin. So, and we all know what it's for. So pumpkin helps keep the dogs regular. Keeps them regular and keeps them happy. Yeah, and then vegetables too. Right here, I just threw various ones in the bag. We have a pretty standard mix that we use almost across all formulations, which is just broccoli, carrots, cauliflower, green beans, and pumpkin. And the reason we use that variation is because what we're going for are different colors. A good way to cover all of your bases when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to vegetables, is you grab one of a different color. And that way you pretty much get all the nutrition you need. It's just a very easy way of quantifying it. Yeah, you want to break the cellulose. You can steam them real lightly, couple of minutes. Yeah, throw them in the food processor as well. Try to avoid the microwave though. For steaming the vegetables, or for doing anything really, it does change the molecular structure of the food. So you're kind of baking out all the good stuff that you just bought when you bought all that good healthy food. Very lightly steamed, or you could blanch them, real quick. They don't have just enough to break that skin, and then run them through a food processor. Yeah, and once again, you don't have to drive yourself crazy with the portion sizes, and a lot of people do this, They're kind of like us, where sometimes you're hungry and sometimes you're not. So, diet's a very fluid thing, so I tell people, don't get the scale out and get all crazy, If he doesn't eat it, just put it back in and give it to him a little later. That's fine. Now, the general mix of the vegetables is right about 25%. And, we're a business, so we have to kind of standardize things, and we're going to say we're going to use these 5 vegetables in your formulation because that's what we're selling you. But my advice as a home cooker is just you go to Publix and you grab what's on sale, and as long as it's a vegetable a dog can consume, it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with just mixing and matching.
5 again, will you?
Sure. Broccoli, carrots, cauliflower, green beans, and pumpkin. Yeah. And once again, that's just our mix that we've had success with. I think you could pretty much have success with any mix of vegetables as long as there's a variety in there and you just change them up.
Is the pumpkin ground up or is it pumpkin
it's
from a can?
nope, just from a can. Yep.
From a can?
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yep, the same stuff that we have all used for our dogs before. Yeah.
I did my Halloween pumpkin, so I froze it.
Yeah, that's even better. Yeah, well, we wouldn't be able to. We'd have to get a lot of pumpkins to do that. So we just buy the stuff in the can, and it works great. So yeah, you're even better. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and so basically, yeah. Now we cook everything too at the deli. I should mention or go back to the chicken, and the reason we do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, we don't really believe that the bioavailability of the food changes much from raw to cooked. We've done the nutrition studies, and you lose very little from cooking it. And the way food is processed today is different than 200 years ago. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is if we were here 200 years ago, I'd advocate a raw diet. Since we're living in modern times and food is produced differently today, I think cooking is a very important element in your dog's health because your food that you buy, even if you buy the best organic, whatever, it's still processed with chemicals, chlorine and so forth. And there's arsenic, and I mean, there's a variety of things that you could find in your food supply, but a very easy way to get that stuff out of your food is just to cook it, and it evaporates and goes away. So we're from the belief that that stuff is worse than the little bit of nutrition that you're going to gain from the raw. So you're better off cooking the food. That's reason number one. Reason number two is, once again, there's a risk of salmonella or E. coli transmission from handling raw meat. And it, even if you take every precaution in the world and wash your hands and everything, your dog could come up and lick one of your kids or something like that, and there's a risk of transmission, which can easily be eliminated just through cooking the food. So we're big proponents of cooking everything. We cook it to temperature, meaning we cook it to a restaurant standard. We follow every standard a restaurant would follow in our deli, which is a commercial kitchen, with one exception, and that's we allow dogs in there. In a restaurant, you couldn't have dogs. The health department would not exactly like that, but we can because we're under the Department of Agriculture, so they don't really mind if we have dogs in there. But yeah, so if you have any questions about raw versus cooked or anything, feel free to let us know, or you can always shoot me an email personally, and I can respond to you. But this is the finished product. This is all it is, which is a mixture of all those foods put together.